Gino Grimaldi,
Here.
Lawrence Green,
Present.
and Susan Cox present. So are there any adjustments to the agenda? Think so? Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody who's here and those listening. This is the time for public comment, and I don't believe that anyone has submitted anything in writing. Is anyone indicated they'd like to speak?
No.
No, and no one in here? Okay, that was short. All right, so now we're going into the business action items, and the first one is Noctel and Amy, or actually I'm James.
So I'll present it and we'll go to questions if we have any questions.
Oh, I see, because I'm looking at this one. Okay. I have 2 copies. Okay.
All right, Jerome, Madam Dave.
Okay. Moving on to Giro.
Thank you. And yes, I'll be putting forward tonight a request for a proposed motion from this committee to amend to increase contract 2022-51 with Giro Incorporated. And just some background, this contract was initially approved by the board on June 21st, 2023. This is related to a community investment plan project to upgrade our operations scheduling software, which is an essential component of our operations infrastructure. At that time, the contract was approved for a not to exceed amount of $1,429,422. And so before we get into the ask, I'm going to give a little bit of the why we're asking this. And is it possible to share the packet for them to, or you can just go to page 5 of your packet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about strategizing for the future at LTD. And when we think about how we're solving for our solution space in the application ecosystem, some considerations that we're putting into our decision making now. So currently the solution for this operation scheduling tool is on premises. So what that means is our team here has a closet over there, and there's a lot of servers in there that we back up regularly. But we're managing all of that information. We manage all the training. We manage all of the maintenance. We have full control, full liability over all the security of that information. And the flexibility of changing the application is somewhat tied to the lifespan of the server. So there's not a lot of flexibility to change if we want to get the full investment that we've made there. Whereas a cloud approach, which is where we put all of our information kind of up here, and outsource things like maintenance, hardware, sometimes training, particularly security of the data, and create a more scalable environment where we're able to change applications more efficiently if we're finding a certain solution isn't working for us. And that's really important as technology continues to iterate more quickly over time. So there's a little visual in here. It's the classic iceberg analogy. A lot of times we're kind of drawn to an on-prem solution because it looks attractive to us. What we can see is that the bottom line is often less. But if you factor in things like maintenance, security, liability, and the general upkeep over time, there's a lot underneath the surface there that we have to consider that can become a risk for us. And so given all of those things, we did do a cost analysis after we had completed a thorough technical architecture assessment, and kind of did a general comparison of the 5-year cost of ownership in an on-prem versus a cloud-based solution, and found that we would save an estimated $600,000 over the 5 years by moving to a cloud-based solution. And more importantly, we'd be freeing up our internal resources to really focus on the critical needs of our information technology infrastructure while outsourcing to these product experts in the operation scheduling space, the support of our system. So that's the why we wanted to go to the cloud. And so with that in mind, it will cost more upfront because we have to account for the cost of additional subscription fees over time. So the request is that we would amend the not to exceed amount of the contract to increase the contract value to $2,261,322. And that is an increase of increasing the current contract value by $968,377. So at this time, I would like to request for questions, or if there's no questions, proposed motion to forward the amended contract with the recommended increases to the Board of Directors with a recommendation for approval.
Any questions? No? Gino? Okay.
And actually, I'm sorry, for the record, I do want to say we originally did get the contract through a request for proposal bid process, and the vendor was selected as the most responsive and responsible proposer, for the record.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I move to forward amended contract number 2022-51 with Giro Incorporated to the Board of Directors with a recommendation for approval.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you very much.
unanimously. There you go, Amy. Thank you. So now it is Resolution 2024, the Kuhn Investments, and that's John.
All right, thank you, members of the Finance Committee, for having me here today. I'm here to speak to our proposed contract for Roadie Express services in City of Florence. So this is a new contract for existing services. We'd reached our maximum extension length for our existing contract for Roadie Express services in Florence. The nature of the services in Florence has also evolved over time. So we've effectively doubled the amount of service in the Florence area, going from hourly service to 30-minute service, essentially doubling the amount of frequency. And we've also noted essentially doubling the amount of ridership, which has been pretty incredible in the time period since that's taken place. So that's gone out for bid and gone through a competitive selection process at LTD. That was posted for public bid. We had members of a selection committee that included a variety of people from within LTD, as well as representatives from City of Florence, to review bids that came through. We had 2 bids that were evaluated and scored through a competitive proposal process, as well as interviews with respective candidates. The service itself is for fixed route service in the City of Florence that goes between essentially the Fred Meyer and Old Town in Florence, with a main stop in between at the grocery outlet where it connects with other services in the area. We receive a small amount of fare box revenue, approximately $6,000 per year, which is not going to fund a service like this. So we're typically not in the business of providing public transit to make money. So we wind up funding this through various grants that we're able to receive. Those are Federal Section 5311 funds, which are formula funds set aside for communities with less than 50,000 people in rural areas. stiff formula funds, which we can use to match against federal dollars. And then we receive local contributions from the city of Florence itself that help subsidize this service. It operates Monday through Fridays, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it also is able to transport bicycles using bike racks. I think you've heard me speak to some degree about this service, but I'm here to be able to answer any questions. The service we make very affordable to community members, $1 per trip or $2 for a day pass. We have seen significant increases in ridership lately, so we've seen this service as being successful. As part of being a fixed route service, coming along with that is a federal requirement that we offer complimentary paratransit service. So locally, that's RideSource. We utilize the same call center, but rather than send vehicles all the way from the metropolitan area to Florence, we utilize the same contractor that operates the Roadie Express to be able to provide services directly in the area. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions about the service or the contract itself. It's for up to a maximum 5-year period, and otherwise would recommend a motion to forward to the board for approval.
Thank you, John. Any questions? Gino?
Thanks for the presentation. Is this the same contractor that's providing the service today?
That is correct. So we are putting forward a recommendation that we enter in a contract with the existing contractor. There's a DBA, so Kuhn Investments, you may also know as River Cities Taxi.
Okay. And the other bid, how close was it in terms of dollars and cents to this one?
I didn't bring the scoring with me. I don't suppose you happen to have that available. We could make that available. Qualitatively, I would say it was relatively close. So we did originally look purely at a written proposal, and I happen to serve on the selection committee and can speak to that. We decided to bring the proposers back for interviews and presentations, and it was based on the totality of that process that a decision was made. So my understanding is the decision was unanimous following that, but throughout the process, scoring was relatively close.
Okay. It'd be helpful in the future if we had some dollars included in the information that goes to us. I understand this isn't necessarily a dollars and cents decision, but also if you could include a summary of the criteria and the actual scoring, not the complete list of everything you looked at, but some type of summary so we get a feel for what you were looking at, how they scored.
That's helpful feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Lawrence, any questions?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I move to forward contract number 2023-46 RCT to the Board of Directors with a recommendation for approval. Is that right?
And I'll second that.
Okay. Lawrence?
Um,
Pardon?
Yeah.
Okay.
asking if I-
All in favor? Oh, no,
Yes.
no. Yep. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And then the next one is,
Same team.
pardon?
Oh, it's the same team. You got.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
it's got
That's
one more
the
of
same thing.
Yeah.
Hmm?
So I'm also here to speak to Diamond Express service that connects Oak Ridge to the metropolitan area at the Finance Committee's pleasure. So this is also an existing contract in which we've hit our maximum extension period. The nature of the service hasn't substantively changed since the original contract, but it is important that we periodically put service out for public bid, competitive bid. So we've done so and have a new contract before the committee for recommendation for approval. This is Diamond Express service that connects Oak Ridge with Eugene starting at the Ray's Food Mart in Oak Ridge, stopping at Westford, Eugene Station, and Amtrak. So there are limited stops in between, and part of that is just due to the nature of the funding used. So this primarily uses a combination of what are known as federal 5311F funds, which are intercity transportation funds, which necessitate limited stops in between for long distance transportation connecting to communities. It's matched using STIF formula funds, and we also receive a local contribution of match funds from the city of Oak Ridge itself. We had a selection committee that included representatives from throughout Lane Transit District as well as a representative from the city of Oak Ridge. This includes a dial-a-ride service for a meal site for older adults on Highway 58. So essentially a supplement to a Meals on Wheels program or a CAFE 60 if you're familiar with those programs in the area. Additionally, receives a limited amount of fare box revenue. We estimate approximately $17K in realized fare box revenue, which again isn't going to pay much for the cost of the overall service, but part of what we're trying to do is create fare that's accessible for a community that includes a larger proportion of low-income households than throughout the rest of the area. So we competitively price these trips at $2.50 per trip or $5 for a day pass. Day passes also include fare throughout our fixed route system in the metropolitan area, so someone's able to travel and connect from Eugene Station. This service also interlines with Amtrak, so someone's able to purchase fare through Amtrak and have connectivity all the way to Oak Ridge. So the rails actually pass by Oak Ridge, but there is not a stop in the area, but someone is still able to have seamless kind of fare system, even though they're going to need to change seats at the Amtrak station in Eugene onto one of our buses. We are attempting to find some efficiencies in the way that funding takes place for future bienniums. So currently 5311F funds come with a very high match rate that we need to match using STIF formula funds at 50%. We're exploring possibilities of using other STIF discretionary funds to reduce the burden on our STIF formula rate. That isn't guaranteed. That's through a competitive process. We'll find the results of that later this year to early next year. This operates 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays and Saturdays, a limited service between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. It is important lifeline service for Oak Ridge residents. There aren't many other transportation options that take people into the metropolitan area, and gas is expensive. It also allows people in the metro area to connect in Oak Ridge for recreation. So it's a mountain biking mecca. And we certainly allow bicycles to be able to be transported using this service. So I want to entertain any questions that the Finance Committee has on this, and otherwise would recommend a motion to forward to the board for approval.
Any questions? Gino?
A little different question on this one. I'm assuming it's the same provider since there was only one bidder.
That's correct. So this is also a DBA, so you may also know TAC as Pacific Crest Bus Lines. And
then I'm sure they increased the amount that we're paying them. Did you look at that? I'm sure you looked at the increase. Is it large? Is it reasonable?
Yeah, the selection committee felt that costs were reasonable under consideration of what was proposed. So in both contracts that were put forward tonight, cost was a scoring criteria and a consideration.
Are we required by the federal government to go out to bid?
Yeah, for that level of service, yes, anything over $250,000, we do a competitive process, which for this was be a request for proposals.
Okay. So is there any possibility of negotiating the price once the bid's awarded?
Right now, we're currently working on a best and final offer called a BAFO. And so we're in the process of now trying to get that best offer from both vendors.
Okay, perfect. I think that's great. And I think when it goes to these, both of these, when they go to the board, a little more financial information for folks so that they can look into your decision-making process a little better and feel good about it. And tonight I'm comfortable approving these, and it's based on trust, but I think we need to maybe have a little more information for folks and for the public.
It's well taken. Thank you.
I'm curious about what is the Oak Ridge's contribution? Is it a percentage or,
It is $12,000 per year.
okay. And that comes out of just their city budget and that's assured? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Lawrence, any questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, is there a motion to approve?
I move to forward contract number 2023-46 TAC to the Board of Directors with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you to members of the committee.
Okay, so now. Pardon? Oh, yeah. Okay, we're ready for a financial update. And Pam?
Good evening. So tonight I'm going to go over our preliminary 2024 financial report. And it is still preliminary, but we're very close to completing all of the financial work that we need to complete for the audit. So I don't anticipate anything major changes coming up on this at this point, at least not from an operational point of view. So, just a minute. All right, so highlights for our fiscal year 24 is the main thing is that district continues to be financially healthy. We ended a year with a surplus overall, combining all of our funds, and our resources covered our expenditures and all of our funds. Our cash reserves are meeting our financial reserve policy. And our revenues met expectations, and payroll taxes are driving the largest increase for that. Expenditures ended below budget due to lower personnel service costs and also spending less on materials and services in several areas. And general fund transfers to the other funds will be at or below the budgeted amounts that we were showing. So all of it is good and headed in the right direction. Okay, specifically for the general fund, our fares and TouchPass revenues decreased by 1.7%. That's probably the one thing on the financial report that is not in a positive light. But I took a look at that, and it was actually due to a lower amount of funds added to the TouchPass cards. So when someone adds funds to their TouchPass card, we don't have any way of knowing when they're going to use that amount. So we just report that as current income when that comes in. And in the previous year, there was about 1.6 million added to TouchPass cards. But in this last the last fiscal year was about 1.3 million. So we don't really have any control over that. And as you know, we have initiated a fare management review project, which will be looking at all aspects of our fare system. So we didn't miss the budget by very much. We did increase the budget going into fiscal year 25 by about 2%. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but we're basically running about the same this year as we were last year. So we will be keeping a close eye on that. Okay, for our non-operating revenues, the largest increase, as I mentioned, was in payroll taxes. So new this year, you can see that there, that top amount, that's $4 million difference in payroll taxes. Well, a portion of that is actually from a change in accounting. So we did actually outpace our budget in actual collections on our payroll taxes, but the auditors had asked us to make a change in our accounting. So there's an amount that the Oregon Department of Revenue sends us each month that has to do with how much delinquent taxes are outstanding. And in previous years, we did not include that in our receivables and didn't include that, we didn't consider that as being collectible at all. But it's actually best practice and recommended by the Oregon Department of Revenue that you do make some estimation of those delinquent taxes that will be collected. So we did go through that process and estimated that just under $3 million of that, about 2.8 million could possibly be collected. And so we did put that into our current year revenue. That will be a one-time kind of an increase from here on out. It will just be a smaller amount up and down of that, whatever it changes from year to year. But I did want to point that out. But we did, even if you take that out of our payroll taxes, we still were about 3% above budget. So that's still a nice increase in our payroll taxes. The other amount I want to talk about just a moment on here is our federal assistance. So each year when we put the budget together, we calculate about how much we think we'll need in operating assistance from our federal money. And because our financial results were very positive this year, we did not have to draw down on as much of that for operating purposes. It was available and budgeted and allowed, but we chose not to do that. And so specifically those funds are the ARPA funds that are require no match and are available for at least a few more years to us. So we do have a plan for using those, but in this particular year, we didn't have to use as much as we thought. So that's good. It's still ours. It's out there to be drawn down. And then, of course, in the other revenue is the other amount that shows quite a bit of a budget, and that is our interest income, which we had continued to budget at a very conservative amount, and the interest rates had continued to stay high. So we have a nice amount of interest income coming in. So that's good. On the requirements side, we, in addition to our revenue being a little bit higher, our expenditures came in less. And so specifically about $6.1 million less than what we had budgeted. You can see that it's about evenly split between personnel services and materials and services as far as how much below budget that we were. And personnel services continue to be our largest amount. The 78% of our operating requirements are personnel services, and that breaks down to be about 57% of that is wages, and about 44% of that is benefits. And then we have about 1% that is allocated out onto grants. So all good news on our requirement side. In our specialized services, now known as mobility management services, again, our comparison to budget was our revenue was less than our budget, and our transfer from the general fund was also less than what we had budgeted. But that is directly related to the fact that our expenses were also below budget. So in this particular fund, we do have a good carryover for our fund balance. So I didn't feel like it was necessary to add any additional amount to the fund balance. So I basically transferred enough out of the general fund to have it at about break even. which you can see $190,000. So. In our Medicaid fund, so our Medicaid fund had an interesting thing happen to it this year. 2 years ago, the Medicaid fund was actually in the hole, about $500,000. And we were kind of like, hopefully this isn't going to be a trend. And it also required about a $300,000 transfer from the general fund. Well, this year, the Medicaid fund operating revenues were $1 million above budget. And our requirements were about $1.6 million below budget. So we ended that with a surplus of $2.7 million. So in looking at why that could possibly have happened is we were going through a transition of an upgrade to our claims billing system in towards the end of the previous fiscal year. And we think that what happened is that we did make accrue for what we thought was the amount of claims that were outstanding. But I think we just underestimated in 2 years ago the amount of claims that were still going to be able to be collected on. And we got all those collections last year. So I did not make any transfer from the general fund, wasn't needed. And this money will go to increase the cushion for this in this fund. And what we're working on is we're trying to get every fund to where it has at least 2 months of operating expenses in their reserves. And this will bring this one up to that, and Specialized Services was already there. So. And then point-to-point fund, just quickly, this one didn't have a lot of activity last year in this fund, but the one major thing that we did do is we had made a commitment to the city of Eugene to help support their bike share program for $250,000, and we did do that, and also received our grant reimbursement for that expenditure. And this is also the fund that our van pool, which is starting to ramp back up. It had not had as much activity as it had pre-COVID, but it is starting to come back up. For the van pool program is what runs through here. That particular program is 100% general funded. So, any questions on any of those? So, turn. There we go. Okay, right, the right spot. All right. So in our capital projects fund, you are going to see that our the assistant that we requested is quite a bit below budget, but that is because we had budgeted for a number of projects that had delays for various different reasons, and we try to match up our federal funding and the other assistance. We match those up with the expenditures. So when the projects are behind, that means the revenue is going to be different for that year as well. We did do our general fund transfer from the general fund into the capital fund this year at the full amount that was expected. And so we do have quite a bit built up in reserve for if it goes the opposite direction. I haven't, since I've been here, I haven't had it go the opposite direction. We've always spent less than, but if it did go the opposite direction and we ended up being able to complete a project early or something started that we hadn't anticipated in the budget, we do have plenty of reserve for the general fund match to be able to cover that. So. Okay, and then on the expenditure side, and I hope you can see it in your packets because it's really small, I know, up on the screen. But really the biggest impact is in the facilities improvements line. And of course, that has to do with our OCC, where we just, for various reasons, spent less in last fiscal year, but it's, as you know, it's going great guns now. So we will be definitely seeing a lot more of those expenditures come through this year. So, okay, and then just one more. All right, Sustainable Services Fund. We had a budgeted transfer amount of $238,919. We did make that transfer, although we probably wouldn't have had to, but we did. It was in the budget. So we did that because our interest income, it was over $500,000. And so now we'll be building that into the budget. You know, our target for this, the Sustainable Services Fund is 2 to 6 months. And I know in the long range financial plan that we have planned to just keep it at about 2 months of reserve, but I feel like we'll be able to create a bigger reserve than that using our interest that we're earning now on that. There's about $11 million in there now. And so, okay. That concludes the fiscal year 24. Any questions on any of that?
Good numbers.
Well, Brianna, I don't know. You might have to advance that one.
Is Gino's hand up?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I'm all set. Thank you. Good report.
Thank you. So thanks. Okay, if there aren't any questions on fiscal year 24, I do want to spend just a moment on fiscal year 25. I don't have any slides for this because we were busy updating the ERP. We did get the fiscal year 24 closed, which was a big accomplishment for us. That was our first time through. So, but I do have some highlights from our first quarter of fiscal year 25 that I just wanted to read to you. So in regards to fair income, I mentioned that we had budgeted about a 2% increase in fair, and collections are about what I would expect for the first quarter. So you would generally expect about 25% of the fares to come in the first, or 25% is our target for the first quarter of budget. And we're at about 22%, which, considering the fact that the university, didn't start back up until almost the end of September this year, I think that's probably pretty good. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to meet budget on our fares this year. Payroll taxes are just under 25%. So for the first quarter, our payroll tax collections are about exactly where I would expect them to be compared to budget. So budget had about a 4% increase built into it. So that means that our collections are about 3 to 4% ahead of where we were last year. And then interest income is already at 50% of the budget. And I'll probably get used to budgeting more interest income about the time the interest rates start going back down again. But anyway, yeah, so interest income is still strong going compared to budget going into this fiscal year. On the expense side, our personnel services are currently at 22.5%. So a little bit above budget, or below budget. I would expect that to be the case because we are hiring and we do still have some positions that were in the budget that we're working on hiring. So I would expect the first quarter to be on a little bit on the low side. Materials and services, though, are surprisingly at 19% of the budget. And so I think that will be the area that we may see some savings compared to budget this year. And we continue to take a look at that. The department managers are now well-versed in running their budget to actual reports from the ERP system, and they are looking at them every month. So I think that has had some impact on that. Our insurance and risk area is below budget, but basically that's because our insurance premiums renew in January. And so this quarter is typically a low quarter for that. In regards to the other funds, the mobility services, just like we saw for fiscal year 24, we're trending below budget in both revenue and services. And it will be interesting to see as we go through the year how that compares to our budget. And then lastly, in the capital expenses, we have spent about $2 million in capital expenses so far in the first quarter. And we have about $10.7 million in purchase orders that are out there for work to be completed this year. But comparatively, the total budget for capital for this year is $36 million. So I don't know if we'll get to the 36 million this year, but it is a positive work's happening. Things are going along, and Linda was just telling our department from the grants point of view that we will be in the month of November drawing down $15 million in grant reimbursements. So things are going along at a good pace. So. Any questions about that?
Are there any capital expenses that are expected that are different than anticipated or?
Not at this point. We haven't had, usually we can judge that by changes to the POs that come through. And at least so far, we haven't seen any of that has a large impact on that. So if we did see that and we thought that it was going to put us close to the budgeted amount, the total overall budget amount, then we would look at that and bring back a supplemental budget for that specific thing. But we had anticipated if we did receive the Attain grant, we had already built that into the budget, so even that amount is not going to require us to come back and ask for anything more. So
thank you.
Yeah. Any other
questions? Thank you, Pam. That's helpful. It's a lot of numbers, but good numbers.
Yeah, I know it is. So anyway, hopefully it'll help to have it, down on paper. So, okay. And I think I'm next again on the budget process. And then perfect. This will just be a short, this diagram shows the budget schedule that incorporates the long-range financial plan and the community investment plan documents. We are continuing the previous schedule to have the draft CIP in the fall. It'll be coming to the board meeting this month. There's a change, however, with the long-range financial plan and moving that schedule back to the spring to align with the annual budget process. The start of the long-range financial plan is the current and next year's budget. Those are the first two columns. We found last year that having a preliminary long-range financial plan based on prior year results and just the current year budget was not as informative as waiting for the new budget. So with a CFO coming soon, hopefully, it made sense for us to go back to the previous cadence of the budget with the long-range financial plan in the spring. So that change has been updated in our budget schedule here. We will continue to provide CIP updates in the fall and the winter, and then the CIP public comment and adoption will still be in the spring. So really the only change is just the moving of the long-range financial plan to align with the budget timeframe. So anybody have any questions about that?
No questions.
So, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we got through everything. I think we're early a little bit. Okay, any questions, Gino? Any comments or remarks from you?
None for me.
Okay, well, thanks to everybody for your hard work to put this in place for us, and we'll be submitting this to the board for approval. And if there's nothing else, meeting is adjourned.
Bye, everybody.